A successful man finds himself facing the one thing that no amount of money, looks, or connections can save him from: death. On this final journey, he's shocked to discover that the three things he valued most in life are the first to leave him. And the one thing he'd long ignored? It's the only one willing to stay by his side to the very end. This story might just make you take a hard look at your own life. Michael thought he had life all figured out. At 38, he had everything modern society defines as success: a fast-growing tech company, a sleek Manhattan apartment, the latest electric car, a packed schedule full of investor meetings and upscale parties. On social media, his life looked like the dream everyone was chasing. Every day, he took time to work on his body, hitting the gym, eating clean, going organic. Every night, he reviewed his finances, planned investments, and built his personal brand as an inspirational figure. Family? Friends? He still called his mom every weekend. That was enough, he thought. He believed he was living right. Until one day, during a routine checkup, the doctor said the words no one ever wants to hear. "Michael, you should sit down. Cancer. Late stage. No cure. Time left, months, not years." Michael's world spun. Everything he once held important suddenly felt distant. The life he had meticulously built, like a tower of Legos, now felt hollow and unstable. But in the middle of that shock, a question quietly rose up in him. If I'm about to leave everything, what or who will lead me first? And who will be the last to stay? He started thinking not in some philosophical, abstract way, but like the entrepreneur he was: practical, direct, survival-minded. First, he thought about his body. Years of workouts, biohacking, thousands spent on health and appearance. But now, his body was betraying him from the inside out. No amount of muscle could save him, no detox could erase the cancer. He realized, my body will be the first to leave me. Next, he thought about his wealth. The apartment, the stocks, the bank accounts, his personal brand, all the things he had spent a lifetime building. But when he left this world, none of it would come with him. It would be inherited, sold, divided. These things belong to me, until I no longer belong to this world. Then he thought of the people he loved: family, friends. Of course they would visit him in the hospital. They'd hold a beautiful funeral. But after that, life would go on. They couldn't follow him through that final door. Michael sat in silence. Was there anything, or anyone, that wouldn't leave him? And then, a voice, soft and almost a whisper, rose from within him. I'm still here. Michael turned his head, searching for the source of the voice that had just echoed in his mind. There was no one in the hospital room. No doctor. No nurse. Just him and a strange, quiet sense that someone, or something, was there with him. Inside him. The voice wasn't loud, dramatic, or frightening. But it made him see something he had never truly seen before. A part of himself had always been there. watching, enduring, and now, finally, speaking. Michael closed his eyes. Memories surfaced. Him at age 7, sketching comic books in his bedroom. At 12, crying quietly as his parents argued in the next room. At 18, standing on the graduation stage, eyes full of hope. All those former versions of himself, tender, imaginative, sometimes scared, he had left them behind in pursuit of becoming a successful man. And now, as everything he once believed mattered was preparing to leave him, only one thing had never left: his soul. Not in a religious sense, not necessarily some invisible spirit floating toward the sky, but the deepest part of him. The part no one sees. The part no one can measure. The part that doesn't need likes, titles, or assets to exist. He had forgotten it for a very long time. He remembered the emptiness he'd felt after big wins. The quiet moments late at night, when the email stopped, the phone went silent, and one simple question echoed in his mind. So, what was all this for? He'd always pushed it away. Buried it under meetings, deals, and shallow connections. And now, as everything else crumbled, the one part he had ignored was the only part still standing. Michael opened his eyes. He took a slow breath. And for the first time in years, he didn't think about what to do next. He simply sat with himself and listened. No longer a founder. No longer an inspiration. No longer a man trying to prove anything to the world. Just a human being, sitting beside his own soul, whispering something simple. I'm sorry I left you behind. And thank you for staying. That sentence didn't change the diagnosis, but it changed everything else. Michael no longer searched for who would stay with him when he died. He had found them. From that moment on, Michael began to see life through an entirely different lens. Before, each morning he'd wake up with a checklist, tasks to complete, goals to hit, standards to maintain so he wouldn't fall behind in a brutally competitive world. But now, he woke up in silence. No packed calendar. No pressure to do something useful just to prove his worth. Instead, he spent time simply observing. Observing himself. Observing the people who once sat at the center of his world. He called Emma his personal trainer, who used to coach him 5 times a week to keep him in peak shape. She answered, surprised and slightly cautious. Michael just said, "Thank you for helping me stay strong. But I won't need the training sessions anymore. Not because I'm giving up, because I'm learning how to let go." Later, he stepped into the garage and looked at his Tesla Model S, really looked at it, maybe for the first time. Not as a symbol of success. Not as a way to impress. Just a machine. Beautiful. Modern. Soulless. He gently placed his hand on the hood and whispered, "I let you define me for far too long." He called Ethan, a close friend from college he hadn't seen in years, lost somewhere in the whirlwind of meetings and milestones. They met for coffee by a window bathed in soft afternoon light. Ethan went quiet when Michael shared the news. "I don't even know what to say," Ethan exhaled, "but if you need someone to just sit with you for however long you've got, I'm here." Michael smiled, grateful. But deep down, he knew, no matter how much Ethan wanted to stay, there would come a moment when he'd have to go alone. Family, friends, wealth, health, they were all precious gifts. But he was starting to understand, they weren't forever. They were part of the journey, not the companions that would walk with him to the very end. He once believed he lived for those things, to possess, to protect, to prove. But the truth was, none of them could go with him. The only thing he could take was the part of himself he was just now beginning to reconnect with after years of neglect. In the quiet, Michael began to write. Not emails. Not business plans. But words meant only for himself, letters of apology, gratitude, and forgiveness. He didn't know how much time he had left. But he knew one thing. It was time to start living for the part of him that would never leave. When Michael began to write, something strange happened. The words that poured out weren't grand philosophies or desperate cries. They were simple. Human. I'm sorry I forgot what it feels like to live, not just exist. Thank you for the quiet moments, when no one was watching, no one was scoring, just me, with me. As he wrote, Michael realized he was finally facing something he'd spent most of his life avoiding. The true meaning of life wasn't in what he had, it was in how he showed up. Not in how much he achieved or owned, but in how deeply he connected with himself and with the world around him. He thought of his body. A friend he had once pampered, but mostly to perform, not to listen. Now, as it weakened day by day, he began to truly speak to it. No more pushing, no more desperate attempts to stay youthful. Only this. Thank you for carrying me this far. He thought of his possessions. The things he once believed defined his success. Now, they were just artifacts. Traces of time, desire, fear of never being enough. He understood. They weren't evil. But they were never the destination. He thought of his family and friends. The ones who loved him not for being a CEO. Not for how many followers he had, but simply for being him. They couldn't walk with him forever, but the love they gave would carry him, even when he had to walk alone. And then, finally, he thought of his soul. The part he had once dismissed, ignored, forgotten. Now, it was the only thing giving each remaining day meaning. It didn't ask for anything. It didn't judge. It didn't keep score. It only asked for one thing: presence. Michael realized he didn't need to renounce everything. Didn't need to retreat to a monastery or live in the woods to find peace. That wasn't the point. He just needed to change how he saw and how he lived. To care for his body like a companion. to enjoy material things as fleeting gifts, to love his people fully, moment by moment, and to always make time to return to himself, to that quiet place no one else could enter but him. He understood now. We don't have to leave life to find our soul. We just have to stop and listen. Time began to move more slowly after Michael started writing. Not because the world had slowed down, but because he had begun to truly show up in each moment. Every morning, when sunlight slipped through the hospital window, he no longer saw the start of a race, but an invitation. Today, you have one more day to live fully. He no longer asked, "What will I accomplish today?" Instead, he asked, "Who will I become today?" The truth is, the illness didn't disappear. There was no miracle, no cure. But something far deeper changed. Michael's experience of life. He had once lived as if he were the center of his own solar system, with career, image, status, and achievement revolving around him. Now, he saw himself differently. Not the center, but a beautiful part of something greater and deeper. He no longer feared death the way he used to. Not because he had conquered fear, but because he had made peace with the one thing he had long avoided: his soul. And in that stillness, death no longer felt like an ending, but a doorway, leading somewhere he didn't fully understand, but no longer found unfamiliar. A week before he passed, Michael recorded a message. Not for social media, not to go viral, just a voice memo, meant for anyone who happened to hear it. He said, "If you're hearing this, maybe you're busy. Maybe you're like I was, trying to be enough in the world's eyes. But I want to ask you, just stop for a second and ask yourself, who will stay with me until the very end? What inside me is real, lasting, and cannot be taken away?" Don't wait like I did to ask that. Your body, your wealth, your name, even your loved ones, they're all precious. But don't ever let your soul go hungry. Nothing can replace it. Take care of it every day. You don't need to do anything dramatic. Just be awake. Be grateful. Be still. Believe me, your soul is the only friend who will walk with you where no one else can follow. The day Michael died, the sky over New York was a soft, pale gray. There was no grand funeral, no headlines. But in the quiet room where he took his last breath, there was something unmistakable. Peace. Not because he had prepared for death perfectly, but because he had lived every one of his last days with the one thing that never left his side.